Okay. Okay, this presentation is to provide information associated with the processes that the OPI is preparing for House Bill 156 implementation. It's a bill that was passed during the 2025 legislature, and we wanted to provide information to a variety of audiences, and that's why this is being recorded at this time. As we get started, what's happening is I'm presenting a screen and I'd like to explain how the presentation is organized. It states here that the presentation is intended as both a timeline and a process explanation, as well as guidance for staff and interested field members. The targeted audience is for OPI staff, other agency staff, counties, districts, and other concerned organizations so that they can share in helping us get this whole project upright and in place on time. And so a description of what will be presented. On the top edge of the presentation for the full time, you should see these particular categories that I'm circling right now. There'll be titles, subparts, not so much, a description of the timeline, and then different colors for the target audience that's being spoken to at the time. So we've written a presentation that's intended to give districts information, counties information, OPI staff information, and OPI programming staff information. There's additional columns for statute references, a few notes, and then what I'm calling collected data. What collected data is referring to is as we go through the presentation steps and its timeline, they each begin with a title. And in this case, the example says that the first thing we'll talk about is determining the subsidy per mill calculation. After the description is given for how that's calculated, we're going to collect that title over here because what it represents is some data that we need for further calculations later on in the presentation. And that way, when we collect these titles, we can show where they get used later on in the timeline and the step presentation. Any questions before we get going from my panel that I didn't introduce? Um, okay, let's go ahead
Sounds
and,
great.
okay, thank you. Uh, just just to make sure everybody understands, I have a panel with me who is welcome to ask questions, and that way we can provide better and more in-depth information for people viewing this at a later time. I have with me Marla Swanby, who works here at the OPI as a project coordinator. I have Jessica Bird with me from Missoula County. I have Nancy Hall with me from the Office of Budget and Program Planning at the Governor's Office. And I have Shelley Turner, the director of the MASBO organization. Okay. Well, let's get started then. This is the presentation, and just to let everybody see, I'm going to scroll. Don't get a headache, but I'm going to scroll real quick just to show the length of the presentation. It goes down to, it's in Excel. It runs down to, say, row 550 or so. And we're going to walk through all the steps necessary and sort of indicate what the target audience is as we go through. Just to reiterate, in this case, we're starting with a discussion about stuff that OPI has to do, and therefore the calendar and the arrows are in that color. And at the bottom, you can see here, we're going to talk to the programmers a little bit and hopefully help them with some guidance so that way you can focus on parts that you're interested in. Okay, so let's just sort of talk this through and work our way down the line of arrows. To get started, the first thing that the OPI requires is something that's already in current statute. It says up here that on the timeline, by December 1st, the Department of Revenue, or DOR, provides the OPI taxable values. The OPI does receive these taxable values from DOR and already has, and we are required to receive them by the DOR under this section of law. And actually, here's some of the words from that section of law. So what happens is the Department of Revenue provides us taxable values for each school district. The OPI takes this information, we enter it into our database here at the OPI, which is known as the Mayfair system. It's an acronym, but I can't remember exactly what it is, and it's really long, so we won't get into that. So that happens on December 1st. So that's one piece of information we need to do this process, and it's already been received by the OPI. Just a point of clarification, December taxable values are not the assessor taxable values that are received on the first Monday of August. They're slightly different because they've had adjustments, and they've also been adjusted to make sure that the whole part of the state that is covered by high school districts is also the same value that is covered by every inch of land of the state that's covered by elementary districts. And if you think about what that means, and I guess I'm going to point to this Montana shaped map here, is there any part of the state that is not covered by a high school and an elementary district? The answer to that is no. Even K-12 districts are separated into elementary and high school portions for the determination of taxable valuation. And so when we get those December 1 taxable values, we have to assure that every square inch of the state is accounted for high schools and elementaries. And we also verify and assure that those two values equal each other, because the value of property in elementary districts equal that of elementary districts. And it's important for the calculation. Let's talk about the calculation a little bit. So that's one part. The second part we need is somewhere between beginning in December through March. We have to produce the subsidy per mill calculation, and it uses both of these two pieces. So let's talk about this second piece here. We need to figure out the prior year base levy area to determine what portion of a district's base budget is normally paid for through levies, especially if there was no such thing as guaranteed tax base aid at a district level. And to do that, we use this formula. We go prior year base levy area is equal to 35.3% of the per A and B and basic A and B, or the basic entitlements, and 40% of the special ed allowable cost payment. And we have to take those pieces and we have to make sure that they're split for elementary and high school portions. Okay, now there's a lot in that, so let's talk about it just for a few seconds. The base levy area of a district's budget, well, base is for these two pieces, the per and the basic. Base is 80% of the total. And the state pays a component payment called direct state aid, or DSA, and the state pays 44.7% of that amount. So the remainder to get to the full 80% is equal to 35.3%. And that's where this value comes from. Normally, in a district that does not receive any guaranteed tax base aid, their property taxes consist of 35.3% of the per and the basic when you're talking about calculating the base budget area. So let's talk about the second piece. 40% of the special ed allowable cost payment. Well, in statute, the calculation of determining special ed allowable cost payment in the base is equal to two parts. The state pays 100% of the special ed allowable cost payment. And then the formula says an additional 40% is put into the calculation of the base area. This 40% is an obligation of school districts for payment. And once again, if the school district does not receive GTB, 40% would be a levy obligation of the district. And so what we've done essentially is figured out by figuring 35.3 of per basic, 40% special ed, we're figuring out the levy obligation area of a school district. Okay, so now the next part of this statement says split by elementary and high school portions. So the reason we have to split it by elementary and high school portions is because part of this calculation is going to use taxable value. We receive taxable values for all elementary schools, and we receive it for all high schools. And when we split, it's really talking about our K-12 districts. We have to find a way to assure that we can split the K-12 into its component parts, being that of an elementary area and a high school area. If you think about it, not necessarily for a K-12 district, but when you think about the taxable value for, say, an elementary school district, traditionally in elementary school districts, land area is not equal to that of the high school area. And because the land area is differing in sizes, they have differing taxable values. Therefore, each mill, which is 1/1000th of that taxable value, are not equal either. And so something had to be done to find a way to separate the K-12 into elementary and high school portions so that the elementary could be nested with all the other elementaries, the high school portion could be nested with all the high school portions, and you'd have the equal area, now that we're going to counties, the equal area for elementary and high, sort of laying on top of each other if we want to consider it that way. Then there's one other part we have to contemplate. The last sentence here, it says, this base area is then totaled or rolled up by the county. And here you can see the picture down here, inclusive of consideration for joint districts. So what is a joint district? A joint district is this guy down here. This particular school district, if this was its shape, has some land area inside this county, and it has some land area in another's county. And there's a process already in place that counties utilize for the retirement GTB calculation and also retirement mill calculation called the FB 8A and sometimes the 8B reports that those two counties share with each other. So what we have to do is we have to apply that same logic for this school district, because when counties make a levy and also receive GTB, they should only be receiving those pieces for the portion of the district that lies within their county. And the other county will have to be responsible for the portion of the district that lies within their county. Thank goodness we already have a procedure for this process. Okay, so now that I've babbled on all by myself about these two pieces that we need, I'm going to talk about the actual calculation a little bit, but I'm going to take a pause for a second. Do you guys have any questions?
I do have a question. I'm not sure if it's going to get us into the weeds or not, so I apologize if it does. But the DOR sets the rates in December. Again, they set different rates, obviously slightly different in August. But what happens if they make an adjustment after that? Because we have seen that happen on occasion for a school district.
Okay, so you're absolutely right. And let's sort of do it this way. And if I don't answer your question, make sure you come back at me.
Sure.
In August, when the assessor taxable values come out, sometimes after that first Monday of August, occasionally there's a reassessment of the taxable value. and they go back to the school, and I think it's called a AB 72T form. What they do is they go back to the school and they say, here, we have a reassessed value for you. And if the value is, I think, less than a mil, Jessica, you can straighten me out on this. If the change in taxable value equates to the less than 1 mil's value, the district has the choice to accept or reject the change or the reassessed taxable value. And so what happens on occasion is a elementary school may choose to make the change, perhaps because the high school maybe is more land mass, they make the decision not to reassess. And so what you end up with in August is differing taxable values for the statewide value that is different elementary and high school. The situation with the December taxable value is there's no renegotiating the numbers. Department of Revenue goes and does a recalculation to get it nailed down on December 1. They send it to us and they don't change it. That's why we use the December 1 for determining subsidy for mills rather than the August one, because the land value won't be equal at elementary and high school on occasion. Did I get that right, everybody?
I think so.
Okay.
Yeah.
Did I answer your question, Shelley?
I believe so.
Okay. So even if they wanted to make a change after December 1, if they called us up and they said, hey, we really messed things up, we generally have a little time to get that sorted out. These subsidy per mill calculations, we usually chug here at the OPI throughout December. For this calculation, we don't really need to print anything anywhere to the public until March 1. It goes on our data sheets. As per statute, that portion actually did need to go on those preliminary budget data sheets. So there's a little bit of time in there. If something was to happen after March 1, I think we'd be up a creek without a paddle, because I don't really know how we'd have to do it. We'd have to go back to everybody and say, stop what you're doing. We're going to recalculate everything, and we'd have to get the numbers back out to them at a later date. But December 1's not in my history have they changed. So if that helps.
Yep, thank you.
So now that I sort of talked about the concept idea of needing this calculation that determines how much in a subsidy we're going to give per each mill levied, we needed this taxable value, and we need to figure out this levy area. Let's just sort of look at the formula a little bit. This is the formula that has been designed, and I don't think we have to go into it in too much depth. By the way, notice that step 1 has been collected over here because we're going to need this value later. I'm giving an example here about for an elementary portion for a county. In this particular county, I could do this. This particular county has an elementary district, a K-12 district, and an elementary district that's a joint. So here I'm showing District A, B, C, and D. And I'm saying here, these are made up numbers. The real numbers are a lot larger in real life. I'm saying here's 35.3% of the per and basic entitlements being shown here. Note, I put this in bold because I'm trying to point out that I had to find a way to split the K-12 to show the elementary portion separate from the high school portion. It's not too hard to be done. Remembering that, and if you're new to it, also, it's no big deal. A per A and B entitlement is calculated on budget unit, and budget units are traditionally E, elementary, M, middle, and H, high school. If this K-12 has an accredited middle school, which it has to have to be a K-12, the accredited middle school has a specific rate. The elementary portion has a specific rate. The E and M added together is what we call a level, and that level is called elementary. The H has a particular rate for both per and basic, and that is also a level unto its own called high school. So that's how we figure that one out. This would be the elementary portion of special ed. Special ed allowable cost payment is made up of 3 of the 4 portions of special ed allocation. The 3 portions that go directly to a school are the instructional block grant, the related services block grant. These two aren't hard to split out by elementary and high school or level, elementary and high school, because they are a per A and B distribution based on, like I said, A and B. A and B again is done by budget unit, so I can put the E and the M together to get the elementary portion. The last odd man out there is also embedded in the special ed allowable cost payment is a thing called disproportionate cost reimbursement. That piece is not determined at the A and B or budget unit or level value. Rather, it's one number for the full school district. So what has been done historically, even with the district level GTB calculation that we're shifting away from and we're going to the county calculation, that value has always been split based on its proportion of A and B in comparison to level. So it would be get the elementary and the middle and high school A and B numbers and figure out the ratio of level elementary in comparison to the total that would be the elementary and high school together, and then proportionately split the disproportionate cost reimbursement. And therefore, we can figure out what the split is, and then we can apply 40% to that and determine the elementary piece here for how much the levy area in the elementary portion of a K-12 would be. So having belabored that a little bit too long, take the basic and the special ed percentages and add them together here. Then take that information for all 4 of the school districts. I guess I should talk about this for a second, but I'll go back to that. Those pieces for all 4 school districts and total them up. So this is the levy area of every district in the county, inclusive of this guy D. Let's go back and talk about that for a second. So school district D has land in 2 counties. Historically, and I mentioned this earlier, there is a procedure that is used by the 2 counties. It's the FB8A form. The county initiates, the county of location, I think, normally initiates the discussion, and maybe Jessica can sort this out for us. They fill in the form, they say how many students A and B resides in their county, and then the opposing county also says, well, here's how many A and B reside in my county. And then you take the ratio of A and B that resides in each county, and you would take these same values and then split that up so that the portion that belongs in the county is counted in the county of location. So the county of location means the school building resides in this county, but they have land over in some other county. We're going to go into more detail on that a little bit later on. Okay, so where were we? We're to E. We summed up all the levy area for every district in the county for elementary and determined for the pieces of the district that reside in that county. Then we're going to take that Department of Revenue's taxable value, and this is for the county, knowing that the county for the elementary piece is the total of all 4 of these districts, with this being just the piece for that county. So that's F. G is take the ratio of these 2 numbers. H. Okay, so let's pause there for a second. So this ratio is the county-wide ratio of taxable value to the levy area and like kind of contemplate that for a little bit. The taxable value of the county is impacting the amount of funding that the state is going to provide to the county in support of the school district. And if you think about this a little bit, the county levy area, it's money that the state has directed to be used in this calculation. But if we think about what the calculation represents, well, the per and the sped are predominantly made up of calculations that are determined based on A and B, which is also enrollment. So it's a ratio of the county's wealth divided by in a large part, the number of students represented in that county. So it's sort of a GTB is a guaranteed tax-based aid. It's a payment that's intended to equalize funding for areas of the state that have lower taxable wealth and lower population. So I know that's a little bit off the topic, but it's a fun thing to think about. But now let's talk about this ratio and what we do with it. So that's G. Let's go to H. H is just a number. Right now it's 280. Statute does not say 280. What statute currently says is the OPI will determine this number to generate a GTB payment to all the counties in FY 2027 that is approximately equal to the amount of GTB distributed in FY 2026 plus 3%. So the first thing that we have to do, or we're going to have to do, is we're going to have to determine how much GTB did we distribute in 2026. Then we're going to have to add 3% to it and say, okay, this is the amount we need to distribute to counties in 2027. And to do that, we're going to mess around with this particular number. Now, let me explain that in a few seconds. So now cache that as a thought. And let's go through the rest of the calculation. We'll talk about why we have to change that number a little bit. So let's talk about I. I is this formula, but at a statewide level. Remembering we did this for the county up here, E, F, G. Now instead, we're going to take E, F, and this guy, H. We're going to do the same calculation. So we're going to take the taxable wealth of the entire state, and we're going to divide it over the levy area of the entire state. But this time, instead of just doing that piece, notice here, F divided by E, F divided by E. Now this time, instead, what we're going to do is we're going to multiply it by H. What that does is it figures the taxable wealth of the state divided by the levy area, but by multiplying it upward, it makes the state value feel as though it's overly inflated, higher than what it normally would be. The benefit of doing something like that is we're going to compare the county to the state. When we compare the county to the state, what we're doing is saying, well, the state's been artificially inflated. Therefore, each county that does receive GTB can receive more GTB, and more counties can qualify to receive GTB because I've overly inflated the state. Now let's go back to the 280 conversation. If I have to find the number that distributes the amount of GTB distributed in the prior year plus 3%, I can change this number until I figure out how overly wealthy to make the state appear to find the perfect value that complies with what the law is requesting. I hope that makes sense. So the next step there then is to compare the county to the state. And if the county number here is less than the state number, then the county's going to receive money in the form of GTB to the county to distribute to school districts. And so, because this situation does that, the calculation is written here. And really, what this is saying is when this number is less than that number, you're going to take essentially a calculation to determine its compared wealth to this inflated state value. And this formula determines how much the county is disproportionately equal to the inflated state. And this is $1,724 is going to be paid to the county for every mill the county levies. And that would be the GTB distribution to that county for the ensuing year. So why can't I just pay it when I say I'm doing this, why can't I just pay that in December to March? And the answer is it's not paid on the taxable value that I received in December. And it's also can't be paid because it's going to be paid on the taxable value that's going to be received in the upcoming August. I also don't know what the adopted budget is for all these districts. I also don't know how many mills are going to be levied by the county on behalf of the districts. And so without the knowledge of the number of mills, I can't know how many of these for the number of mills I'm going to distribute. But what I can do based on this formula is I can say sometime before March 1, this is the subsidy that we will distribute when we get the budgets and the taxable values in the upcoming summer. How's that for not mind bending? Is everybody with me so far, or did I put you all asleep?
Still here.
Okay,
Me too.
great. If I say anything wrong, guys, you're the experts with me. Make sure you straighten me out, okay? But this is the hard part so far. I think the rest goes a little bit faster and easier. Okay, moving on to the next step. Now, what did I hear? I have a star. Oh, I think I explained that too far. Okay, let's follow the line. Okay, so where can a district or county review this? What we have planned, and did I lose? We had Autumn Warren on with us earlier. I don't know if she's still here, but she's
Yeah,
been
I'm still
working
here.
on. Oh, you are. I'm sorry I didn't introduce you. I missed you on the list, but Autumn's still here. What Autumn's been working on and the school finance division's been working on is where can you see this calculation? How can a county know if they're going to receive GTB support? Well, currently what we've done, and this has always been the case, is on this at this link, and we'll try to make this we'll try to provide a copy of this presentation in a way so that the link will work, but this is on the OPI school funding area. There is a portion called budgets, and there is a product that we produce by March 1 every year called the preliminary budget data sheet. And so if we wanted to check this calculation or see these couple values, the county, the state, and the subsidy for the county, and even that multiplier, this is where we're going with it for now. And it's been historically this way for retirement anyway, and debt service. So it makes sense to put it here. So it says the following is a screenshot of the lower portion of page 2 of any preliminary budget data sheet. We produce these by county. And this is what has currently been written there. And what we've suggested is we would modify this area to also include this new calculation for House Bill 156. And what you can see here is here's what we've always written there. This is this county taxable value. We need the county A and B for retirement GTB. And that's their ratio for that calculation. So what we're considering doing here, or what we've been working on, and these are just some notes, they don't correspond to anything in the spreadsheet. This was I took a screenshot from a different job request that we provided to the programmers, but what the consideration is we're thinking about re-lettering these and putting D and E in here as this is the GTB area. That would be that 35.3 per basic and 40% of special ed. And it would be the total up for the whole county. We're talking about putting the county taxable value per general fund base area. So that would be the county taxable value divided by the levy area as described up here. This ratio right here. That's that ratio. And I know these letters don't correspond above. It's like I said, these are relating to a different job we were asking for to have done. And then we were talking about having the same thing down in the lower area. This has always been the statewide portion. This is for retirement. This is for debt service. We'd have a line here for the county general fund, and it would be inclusive of some of that same related ratio information. Just to let you know that it exists. One extra thing I just thought of, and I know this isn't the right place to do this, but page 3 of the preliminary budget data sheet always used to print the statewide taxable value. We may want to have a place where we print that on here as well, because I think page 3 of the data sheet is going to be going away because we don't need it anymore. Because what it used to do was it would do the district calculation of GTB, and we don't need that because we don't have that going into FY27. So Jessica and other counties, this has always existed. Please feel free to locate this and see if your county is going to be receiving a subsidy for the number of mills that will be calculated going into 2027. This document should come out on March 1, and it should be at this link. So we'll make sure to put out more information about that. Any questions about this? Perfect. Silence means approval. Okay, let's go on to step 2. And it goes a little bit faster. Now we're going to talk to the counties first for a little while. Okay. There's already a current procedure that exists out there. It's called the FP6B process. And each year, the OPI, and we have to do this by statute, we have to provide a document. We provide an FP6B fillable form for counties to use. And what it is it's a 13-tab spreadsheet. It has a tab for each month of the year, and it has a 13th tab for a year-end summary. And so what counties do is they download the file and they use it to track what happens actuals. So they're going to start with their fund balance from the prior year. They're going to record the revenues received. They're going to record the expenditures, disbursements made, and they're going to end up with an ending fund balance. And so what we're going to do is we'll take the FP6B that already exists for equalization. These are the ones that are, closer to school finance, county transportation, high school and elementary retirement. And then we're going to add a couple more columns, elementary and high school general fund base area. And it'll be done the same way. Hopefully you can record your prior year's cash balance, revenues, expenditures, and have your fund balance. The reason it's being discussed here is not only is it important that we understand that we're going to add a couple more columns, but it's also important because the ending fund balance is important to this calculation, because the ending fund balance for a county cannot be reserved. Unlike school districts, when you have ending fund balance, frequently in a lot of funds, you have the option of making reserves. Statute allows for that. A county's ending fund balance has to go forward to help fund the next year's budget. And if you're going to use ending fund balance to fund next year's budget, the county won't need to mill quite so many mills. And that would lower the number of mills needed. And therefore, the subsidy per mill will not be, it'll be based on the number of mills levied. So that's why this is being brought up and discussed a little bit. This is a snippet of the actual Excel spreadsheet that is provided to counties. And then down here, after the OPI receives the FP6B that's completely filled in with that 13th month, some poor soul here at the OPI has to go and hand key all the information from those FP6Bs for the 56 counties. The reason it's done that way, I believe currently, is because there's a lot of checking that goes on. Federal Forest Reserve, there's an actual formula for how much needs to be distributed to each fund. The amount of GTB here for, in this case, retirement, there's a calculation that we can determine if the value is correct. And we want to have some accuracy in this. It's not that we don't trust our counties. We certainly do. It's just that more eyes on something is a help, and we do take some time to make sure that we have the values correct before they get finalized into this calculation so that we know that the ending fund balance is as correct as it can be. Over here again, this is that screen in OPI database. The database is called County. And what we'll be doing is we'll be adding 2 more columns here, one for the general fund base for elementary and high, just like we already have for transportation and the 2 retirements. And so what I've done is I've taken this title here and I'm adding it over here because that's another piece that we need. We have a calculation for the subsidy that we're going to provide in the ensuing year. And now we have a way to figure out what fund balance is available to help fund that county's budget for the ensuing year. Any questions about FP6B collection? And silence means approval. Oh, go ahead, Shelley. Did you have something?
I was just gonna say, no, that's pretty clear. Thank you.
Okay, great. What I missed, Jessica? Anything?
So far, so good.
Okay. And if you're not familiar with this conversation, FB represents fund balance. That's what that means. Okay, let's go ahead and talk about the next step, step 3. Another thing for, so the green is OPI needs to add these 2 columns here. Next step. Okay, something more for counties to do, but it's nothing new. I mentioned this earlier. There's some links here to those FP, I think I was saying the wrong letters earlier. These FP forms is from old coding from a time before my being here at OPI, and it had a lot to do with they were writing code in Fortran, and that's where the F designation came from. And I don't know who or what came up with the logic of all the county names and numbers, but that's the basis of it. Is it had something to do with a particular type of programming code known as Fortran. But anyway, let's talk about this form for a few minutes. There's 2. There's an FP8A and an FP8B. I'm only going to talk A. They're both important documents. You can see here the counties complete these with each other. The OPI needs to update the form because they just have to make some informational changes for years and such. But what this is specific to, as mentioned earlier, was in our fictitious example, this county over here, I'm sorry, this district over here, District D, that lies in and out of the county in question, remembering that located county is the county in which the building actually resides in, and the remainder of the land in which students come from out of county is called non-located. Counties tend to fill this form in that's provided by the OPI as per statute mentioned here, and the counties trade this information. They fill in some identifying information, down here is the important points. They have to provide A and B in taxable value. And here we're talking about the A and B at the located county, the A and B at the non-located county. And yes, we have a few situations in which a school district split across 3 counties. So that's why the second non-located county here. The counties themselves fill in the form and send the form back and forth to each other. And the document is signed at the county level. The county staff should take those signed documents. They should be shared with District D from both counties. The district itself probably shouldn't be making the decision on behalf of the county because it's the county's obligation to assure that they've made an agreement about this A and B. Now, the taxable value piece isn't quite as hard because the taxable value portion is generally figured out by Department of Revenue staff, and they will split the jurisdictions so that there is a piece of that District D, the piece that's in the one county and the piece that's in the other county. But the A and B portion is important. We do here at the OPI get questions about this. How do I split my A and B? The answer is you have to talk to your county. You have to make sure that the county has filled in these FP8 forms and that there's been agreement and signed document to back up what was been agreed to by the counties so that the district then can utilize that A and B information in future calculations soon to be discussed in this presentation. Any questions about FP forms? Jessica, I look to you as my expert because you do have joint situations.
Lots of them. Yeah, I mean, it's a pretty straightforward process and it doesn't look like this is the FP 8A. It doesn't look like it's changing at all. It'll probably be the B that will then have additional pieces added to it with the new change, I'm assuming.
Yeah, you're exactly right because the 8B, too many letters and numbers, the 8B is actually mills. And yes, we'll have to make sure that we modify that document. I didn't put that in this presentation. Thanks for pointing that out. We're gonna have to modify that document for these new columns and take away the base portion so that it's in accordance with this new statute. Good point. Thank you for pointing that out. I missed that. Okay. So that's another piece we need, and therefore I put that down here as, well, we need to know how many A and B are where, and what's the taxable value where, and which county. Okay. Moving on to the next part. Now we've got ourselves all the way to the first Monday in August. So all this work's been going on now that 8B and A forms, that's also done in August. So it's important that those processes are done and provided then to the districts because the districts now have to go to work. They're going to have to put information into the OPI's Mayfair system. But what I have here is where it talks about assessor taxable value. This is the taxable value that comes out on the first Monday of August. And everybody's got a piece in this. And it's important that everybody has a piece in this because we have to make sure that the taxable value used is correct because that's the taxable value that determines the mills that'll get printed on people's property tax bills. We want to make sure that we tax accordingly and appropriately. And so that's why I have an arrow to district, county, and OPI. And so let's just sort of go through it. I put sort of like a summary here, and then I'm going to sort of chat my way down it too. These taxable values from the assessor are released to districts and counties and to the OPI. And then OPI, when we get our stack, we actually take the information and we have a screen and we hand key all the taxable values in for each jurisdiction, for each district in the entire state. So somebody sits there one day, like usually Monday or Tuesday, and they start hand keying away. It goes in a very, specific screen. Districts also receive that taxable value. That is this AB 72 form. They also receive the same form. It comes from their assessors division, and they're regional, they're across the state. The school district also receives the taxable value, and they take their taxable value and they hand key it into the Mayfair system also. The reason it's done that way is because if the OPI puts in the taxable value and the district clerk or manager puts in the taxable value, there's a calculation or there's a little check in Mayfair's that says, are these two numbers the same? And if they're not the same, it won't let the district submit. And we also have checks that we do on our side. We run these reports to make sure that the district and what we keyed in match. That's sort of a fail-safe because you could transpose a number or you could accidentally punch in the wrong one. We always want districts and us, the OPI, to punch in this line 4. That's the guy we're always worried about. Some people get confused. They pop in the wrong value and it doesn't match. Because it determines information to be printed on a tax bill, we want to make sure it's accurate. And so now I'm going to yell at the counties a little bit. And Jessica, straighten me out. Do you guys also receive the AB 72Ts?
We do. We receive those from the Department of Revenue, yeah.
Right, because there's county levies that also have to occur. And so you guys receive them also. So it's important that all three areas make sure that that value is the same and is unchanging. And that way, information, once again, the third time, sorry, information that's going to determine people's taxes is accurate. And we want to make sure this value is right. Let's see, is used for determining county. Yep. So, and if you're still uncertain, taxable value, and 1 mil is equal to 1/1000th of the taxable value of the county. And also when we have district funds, it's of the district. This picture is just the top 4 lines of that AB 72 form that's received by the district, the county, and the OPI. This is the number we want to have entered. And let's just talk just a second or two more about it. This information is confirmed by all 3 parties, hopefully. This down here is a screenshot of where in Mayfair's a district clerk or business manager enters the taxable value. And going back to the FP8 conversation, this particular district, it has land in 3 counties. And that's why getting and receiving the FP8 forms and also the taxable values from their property assessment division is so important that the correct information get put in correctly for the proper county. And that's why the OPI is also doing sort of like that extra check. Let's see, what else did I miss here? Joints. I think we covered everything there. The timeline for this is anywhere between the 3rd week of July. The reason I mentioned 3rd week of July is we've had a long-standing tradition and there's some logic behind it. This Mayfair system that the OPI provides to schools and school districts for entering data is often opened either the 3rd week of July or July 21, whichever one makes more logical sense for that particular year. And then statute says that information has to be entered into this Mayfair system on or before September 15th. And so that's why I picked that range of dates when this happens. So here we have those the AB 72T taxable values coming out. We have everybody looking at it. We've got a clerk or business manager entering it here. That's another piece of the pie I need to do this calculation. All right, moving on. Districts, you got some work to do on this too. A school district, and again, it's in that same time range. A school district needs to go into this Mayfair's database that's housed and managed here at the OPI, and they have to enter some information. What the Mayfair system collects at this time of the year are two big pieces. The first piece it collects is trustees' financial summary information, which is also referred to as TFS. What a TFS is information about the financial position of the school district that is a legal entity, and therefore it's required to provide this on an annual basis. Statute also backs this up. What it is comprised of is all the revenues received by the district, all the expenditures made by the district, and fund balance information for the district. The reason I'm talking about this trustee's financial summary information first is current statute makes certain statements, and let's just talk about what I very awkwardly circled here. Interest earnings. When you report interest earnings into your trustee's financial summary, the amount here, this 27,000 plus number, automatically flows to a different part of the Mayfair system. It flows into the estimated revenues to support the budget on the budget area in the Mayfair system. And you may think to yourself, well, why is he telling me this? What's this mean? Statute says that any interest earnings amounts recorded on the TFS have to be estimated in that same amount for the ensuing year. And when you estimate something like interest earnings on your budget, that's considered a non-levy revenue. A non-levy revenue is a revenue that's being estimated to be received that is not going to be gathered through levy sources. And non-levy revenues count towards support of the levy area without levying to it. Therefore, the levy area that is going to be needed by the school district for the actual county payment will be lowered by the amount of interest earnings recorded on the TFS. Something else that's being pointed out here is tuition. Tuition for 1 year was required by law to be calculated at the base, starting on your trustees report for 2026. It's going back to the over base. So if you're still thinking your tuition is going to count towards a non-levy revenue source for your budget in the base, please don't do that for the ensuing year. It's going back to the over base area. Another thing that's being shown on the screen is it says remaining fund balance available. This is funds that you have on your TFS. Let's just do a quick example. You received $100 in, but you only spent $80. Your fund balance is $20. In the general fund, you can reserve 10% of your intended budget for the ensuing year, or if you don't reserve it, it will become what is called unreserved fund balance reappropriated. Those dollars are also used to reduce the levy area and therefore would require a smaller levy area that the county is going to have to levy on. So just a couple things I want to point out. We start with the TFS to determine any non-levy revenues that may flow across, and also to determine how much fund balance is going to be unreserved by the district to help fund the levy area for what they're actually going to send the levy need to the county for. So now I'm still collecting things, talking about TFS Mayfair's collection items. Did I get that right, everybody?
Yes.
Yeah.
Wow, I'm batting 1,000. I can't believe it. I don't think it's possible. Okay. So we're getting there. I mean, we're down to row 250. So let's do step 6. So step 6 works this way, and this is going to have to happen after this TFS information is collected and after the budgets are adopted. So I'm going to walk through sort of like this pink area, and it's really about helping the programmers to understand what it is that there is going to be getting sent to the counties in a system at OPI called County. So it says the OPI will make programming changes to determine an adjusted base requirement area. So I'm changing my terminology from earlier where I kept talking about subsidy per mill was using a levy area. Now what I want to start referring to as, because we're doing this upcoming August, we need to figure out the base requirement area, which is very similar to the earlier discussion, but we're going to need to adjust it based on the non-levy revenues anticipated and the unreserved fund balance for appropriated that flowed to the budget. So we'll talk about it in detail here in a second. It says this was previously known as the GTB area and was funded with GTB and local levies at the district level. We got rid of GTB at the local level, so it's going to the county now instead. So the new district requirement is the amount that's going to be passed to the county to have the county total them all up and possibly write that amount to property tax bills, but we'll go into that detail in a few minutes. Here's the suggested method that's going to help the programmers, I'm hopeful. And I'm pointing out here these weird titles here. If you're reading that and wondering what that means, you don't have to put too much effort into knowing. I've built an Excel model that describes for our programmers each step and how to do each calculation. So that's what this is referring to. So this is sort of like for the programmers reference if they choose to watch this presentation. So here's the calculation. It's going to sound familiar. We're going to take the per A and B plus the basic entitlement times 35.3 plus special allowable cost payment, 40% of that amount, is going to equal the unadjusted requirement. And we're going to have to separate that by elementary and high school for the current budget year. So remember at the beginning, the discussion was using information from the prior year. This time it's for the current year. And I can't do the current year calculations of per, basic, and special ed until I have all the enrollment in and A and B calculated. And that calculation uses 2 enrollment dates. It uses the first Monday of October and it uses the first Monday of February. And that's why I can't necessarily use the prior, that subsidy per mill calculation as all prior year because it's being done earlier. Now I'm going to have to do this calculation after I've calculated these values for 2027, which we don't distribute it until March 1st. So here's how that calculation lays out, and it's just done sort of step by step. It's going to sound just like it did in step 1. I'm going to take the per and basic entitlements. This is an example for a K-12 district. There's my elementary and high school. I split them up. I described how we do that previously. I'm going to take 35.3% of that. I'm going to take special ed, same story as earlier. We're going to use all the same type calculations. We're going to take 40% of that. We're going to add together the component pieces. B plus D is going to equal E. This is essentially the FY 2027's levy area, or what I'm terming now as the requirement area, because this is the amount required for the county to help the district to fulfill by levying at the county level. But this is not what I want to send to them. I need to go into a little bit more detail. Here's what we're going to do next. We're going to total all the budgeted non-levy revenue that supports the base area plus that unreserved fund balance reappropriated. Remembering that that comes from the actual Mayfair's collection that's going to happen this summer coming up, anytime after the third week of July, all the way through September, or mid-September rather. So here I'm going to split the non-levy revenue and that unreserved fund balance appropriated. How it gets done and has been done historically for the district level GTB is you take the ratio of, what do you take the ratio of? You take the ratio of these two values. So you total these two and it gets divided, this value divided by the total of these two. You can see here it's elementary divided by the elementary and high school. And this then is a 67-33 split for non-levy revenues and unreserved fund balance reappropriated. Here we're showing it for non-levies. Here we're showing it for the fund balance. Here's the total of the two. The reason I have to do something to split them up is because I have to apply the proper portions to the elementary and to the high school when it's a K-12 school district. We don't collect non-levy revenues and unreserved fund balance reappropriated by level. We collect it by district. So what does that mean? What do I do with these two values? Well, I have to take these two numbers and I have to reduce these two numbers by the amount of funding I have available to support this requirement area. So this minus this equals 405.62 in this particular elementary situation, and then the same for high school. These two numbers here together, or separately actually, this is what is considered the actual adjusted requirement and is the number that's going to be sent to the county. So because the county is going to do a collection of GTB and levy to support this as one of the districts in their county, and then redistribute those funds out to those districts in their county, similar to what is currently done for retirement GTB. All right, I'm going to go on to the next step, or a little bit more about this. So you can see we use some of that Mayfair's information. I already said that. I'll try to move on. Okay. It says, keep in mind that all districts in the county are going to need to be totaled, including that the adjusted requirement will need to be split up for joints. We're going to use the same FP8A form to do that as described earlier. There's suggested programming, and this is a reference for our programmer once again. This is just a reminder that our District D is that split, and the 8A is used to determine that A and B split for those joint circumstances. And I'm pretty sure that's what's described here for our programmers. And this is saying, here is some of these collected pieces that are being used for that calculation. I'm going to take a pause there for a second. Is it feeling okay? Do you guys, do you have any input? Something more? You good?
That makes sense.
Okay.
The main thing I think for our school districts will be to get everything in on time.
Oh, excellent point. Yeah, I think that's one of the big takeaways from this presentation is, unfortunately, this is like sort of a Swiss watch. You have to make sure all the timing fits perfectly, and if somebody doesn't do their job, it throws a wrench into the works and it gums it up for everybody down the line. And a really good point to be made right there. So really the next phase of the conversation, and that's why I wanted to stop there for a second, is the next phase goes into talking about what we call the FP10A process. It's a county process that currently exists out there. Counties are aware of it. I'm hopeful the districts get some education on this too, so that you can see that we're all playing the same game. It's just that we all have our own roles and sometimes people haven't communicated with each other some of those roles. What an FP10A is, like I said earlier, the FP6B was kind of a report of the actuals. The FP10A is somewhat of a county's budget, and it has to take some of these pieces that we've been talking about so it can develop its budget. And so I'm going to talk about this. I'm now going to go and talk about like there's going to be A, B, C, D. It's going to go down through, and it's going to use a lot of the pieces we've been talking about. So this is sort of like a an inflection point. This is like a big change that we're going into talk about here now. And that's why I was pausing to see if there's any questions, anything above. And we'll get this thing wrapped up after discussing this portion. So we're ready? Yeah. Okay. So in accordance with statute, districts have to submit their final budget to the OPI on or before September 15th. It says, although counties can begin this FP10A process earlier, they don't want to go too far with it. You got to make sure all your districts in the county and your joint districts have finished hitting that submit button. And I've pointed out very small here, and this is for other people's references, just so they know it exists. After you've put in your TFS and you've entered your budget information, there's that taxable value. I know it's really small. There's a button down here, step 10, it says submit to OPI. When a district presses that button, their budget is submitted to the OPI's database called Mayfair's, but there's some more things that happen I want to point out. After they hit the submit to OPI, the budget report, every page of the budget report gets a submit ID number on it. There's something else that happens when you hit submit to OPI. Information that's required for, and I'm just going to point it out here, for retirement, the information from the retirement requirement of the district goes into our county database, the county system in this FP10A area. What's going to happen in the future is when you hit this button, the adjusted requirement area for the district is going to go into the county database. And what you see here currently, notice in the county database, there's a submit ID number. This number should match the budget number that's printed to the district's budget. Districts are required to mail or send a copy of their budget to the county. Counties should take time to make sure that the budget submit ID number matches the submit ID number that's showing up in the county database on this FP10A sheet. That way we avoid settings in which the district calls us up and says, oh, I hit submit too early. I made a mistake. Could you unsubmit me? We can do that. And so if we do that and we don't tell the county and the county moves forward with the FP10A, we may have created a hiccup in everybody's world. We don't want that to happen. So the counties have to help the OPI, the districts have to help the county, and everybody, all vice versa. Make sure we check on these submit ID numbers from the budgets that get sent to the county and that they're these values here. All right, so I'm not pointing out anything against Beaverhead. It's just I happened to pick those guys. So let's talk our way down this thing a little bit. It says, when the district submit final budget is the adjusted requirement, it's going to show up in the county system. So this is for our programmers. They're going to have to add a couple columns here. Here's all those districts. The adjusted requirements should show up here. As this data is, oh, that's a reference for our programmer. We generally store that information on this particular table. Here's what the county screenshot looks like currently. Notice that final requirement was calculated in step 6 above. Those are the values that'll get printed in this area. Here I point out the submit ID number on the right. It's referring to these. It should match the submit ID on the budget for the district that is provided to the county. Um, please verify it. All right. So that's A. Now we're going to go into B. This is sort of, we're talking about, yeah, it shows up better here. Here were those net requirements. That's here and here. Now we're going to work our way across these tabs, and that's what these A, B, C, and stuff is referring to. So here is, we're going to talk about for a second, B. Okay, so just like any budget, we've collected in all the different requirements for all the districts, including the joint districts, to the county. Counties also have access to receiving non-levy revenues at a county level. So they get federal forest, maybe they get some oil and gas production taxes. What they can do is they can anticipate that they will receive some of these non-levy revenues, and they could apply them against the requirements, the total requirements of all the districts in their county, and they can apply some of that to pay down the requirement amount so that the county levies fewer mills to the taxpayers. Of course, just like districts know, when you anticipate to receive a non-levy revenue, and if it doesn't materialize, you could end up with a revenue shortfall. And therefore, counties need to know their business when making the choice to anticipate to receive certain non-levy revenues. Now, I'm going to throw this out there, with the exception of at least one. Coal gross proceeds are known, and I don't have to go into that conversation now, but counties that receive that know what I'm talking about. And they should be anticipated because law says so. Okay, so now we have requirements, a county anticipating some non-levy revenues. Let's go down to C. Counties, you're on the hook again. Here's the next screen. In this screen, this is where the county is going to carry the year-end fund balance from the FP6B, which we talked about an hour or more ago, into the ensuing year's county fund. Remember, reserves are not permitted in a county budget. And so this is a note for our programmer where we generally store this, but here's what I'm pointing out. Here's those net district requirements. This is a sum up of each district in the county, and they will be printed here and here. These are the would show the total anticipated non-levy revenues. That would be from like B above the screen we were just talking about. And then this is the cash fund balance that came off that FP6B that we were talking about near the beginning of the presentation. That number gets hand keyed here. And so what you do is you fill in your FP6B, you receive all your revenues, you make all your disbursements, you figure out what the fund balance is for the county level. They enter that value here. It's important to enter that value there because that number, just like anticipated non-levy revenues, is used to help support the county level requirement of the districts that got sent up to the county through the May Fairs process. So that's C. D. Moving across our tabs. Counties a little bit more, and I guess maybe it's really turning into a programming game here. These last three tabs, or D, E, and F, which we're going to go through, there's nothing for anybody to put any kind of numbers in anymore. This is really just a summary or summaries of how the calculation is intended to work at the county level. Notice that we're going to add a couple more columns here, or I guess they've already been added, but they have to be calculated. I went through the O, N, O, P, and Q and sort of just said these are those calculations that would have to happen. You can see here that the information to do 3 of these 4 calculations was determined way back in that earliest conversation under step 1. You see here, it's the statewide F, which F is actually referring to here, um, divided by statewide E, which is, I guess, being referred to here. No, that doesn't feel right. Heh, good presentation, Paul. Anyway, these calculations have all been determined.
Shut up. You're doing a great job.
Yeah, what the hell?
Yes.
What did I mess it up here? Anyway, C step 1L. Oh, this is actually all the way at the very, very top. What's being referred to? It's near the beginning of the presentation. It's actually referring to those all the way at the very, very top. Oh my goodness, it's right here. Look at me, how unprepared and prepared I am at the same time. Here's your F, here's your E. So it's referring to these times the multiplier H. So essentially, it's the very same calculation I discussed right near the beginning of the calculation. That would be this value up here for elementary and high. This now is talking about near the beginning of the presentation. This is the county calculation. This is that F divided by E. And so that's going to be this guy right here. And then I don't know that we need P. We'll talk about that internally. But this then is essentially going to be not quite this calculation. Anyway, this is it will be this. This will actually be the subsidy per mill that is to be levied, which is going to show up in the next screen here. So I'm trying to give us and a whole lot of people a few breadcrumbs on, I think, what we need to be printed onto this screen. Okay, I almost bumbled that, but I think I may have saved myself. Let's talk about F for a second, which is the next tab. Yeah, the next tab now is talking about some more programming and some more information. What's being described here is an adjusted county taxable value per mill to be written here and here, and the number of mills required here and here. Okay, I'm going to probably divert from describing the math here a little bit. How the calculation is done and the math, whoever developed it was way smarter than I am. Essentially, what the math does is it says, okay, county, here's all the requirements of all your districts, minus any non-levies, minus any fund balance you had. Here's the amount of the requirement for the county that's left. And normally, if there was no GTB, what we would do is we'd figure out what the value of a mill is, and we'd figure out how many mills is required to generate enough revenue to have the revenue available for that remaining requirement. But somebody with the left brains well before me recognized that if you have GTB that the state's going to provide, that's going to lower the ending requirement and require a differing number of mills. And so what this calculation does is it says, I'm adjusting your county taxable value so that we can figure out how many mills are going to be required after you receive your GTB. And that's really what these steps are doing right here. I actually think whoever came up with this is brilliant. I'd really like to know who figured this math out, because when I do the math myself, I go, 100%, I get you. Those are the number of mills after the amount of GTB you're going to receive, so we can determine how much of a subsidy you're supposed to receive also. So that's what you end up with in S here. They will be printed here and here. And actually, if you have time and you want to do the math, it's pretty clever. This all is developed off of, I think it's one of these, I think it's this elementary retirement area. It's kind of fun. Anyway, finally, the last tab. This is a summary and reconciliation tab way out over here. What it does is it says, okay, county, How much non-levy revenue did you anticipate? How much unreserved fund balance for appropriated do you have and have to have? What is the state subsidy in GTB? How much, based on those mills determined in the earlier screen, how much levy are you going to levy? And if I total all those down, that's the total revenue that should be getting generated to be distributed to the school districts in association with their requirement for their district. Kind of like the 2240 money is developed and distributed at the county levy level for the requirement of the retirement needs that are currently done. It's the same process essentially. So this is really a summary, but this number here should match all the way back up to the very first screen of, I'm going to just scroll up there, the very first screen of these, what will be here and here, these guys all sum down. And these guys all sum down does include your joint pieces. So just that, because Bright, Wise River, and Wisdom relay in two separate counties. Okay, so that's one thing that could be checked, and I'm going on about that a little bit for a reason. Here is then, is that last screen? Yes. Oh, not quite. Okay, I'm gonna divert for a second, but I'm going right back to that same thought about all this being summed up in this total. I'll get back to this in a second, don't forget. There's a last step. Counties also have to hit a submit button. Notice it says, I've entered my FP10A. You hit that submit button, and this one happens to be for Bighorn. I'm not picking on you, it just happens to be. I picked that one when I was doing this. When they hit that submit button, they're basically writing information back to the Mayfair system. And we're going to talk about that in a couple seconds, because that's going to be a summary of mills. And it's also going to generate a thing called an FP9. Lots of FP forms, right? So now that I said that, and I'm going to tell you to put a pin in that one and hold that one on the side. Let's go back to the conversation about totaling this up and making sure this amount's available. Here's where I'm going. This is a comment for our OPI staff, and we have to figure this out for our districts, and this is where I hope I'm going to wake Shelley up. It says, OPI staff, it's my understanding that districts have requested a published summary document. It should be discussed, but it might be a benefit to review the current FP10A report and either publish it for districts or review or develop a new summary report. See the separate tab in here, and let's click over there and take a look at it. All right, Shelley, this is maybe something you and I and counties and districts should talk about. This is currently a report that's generated, and we could modify this to include the elementary base and the high school base, but here's the districts in the county, including the joints. There's their submit IDs. This is the retirement summed up right here. Here we have the same for their high schools. Here I have a total of the net requirements, their anticipated non-levies, their fund balance, any obligated cash. That would be for like encumbrances and stuff. Here's what they have available. This is the adjusted net requirement. Here we go down here, we're going to look at the county taxable value. There's their mill value. Now we don't need the A and B, that's more for retirement. We'll go down here, we could probably ignore a whole lot of that. When we get down here, here's that same summary screen, and we could modify this to include the two new county accounts. This should end up being the total revenues in association with all the revenue streams to help fund that initial need up top of this report. If we were to provide this report at the time in which the county finished putting in their FP10A, district could loop back and be assured that they've been taken care of. And I'm not throwing anybody under the bus. Don't get this wrong. I'm just taking the pieces I've heard from everybody. I understand there's a certain amount of concern that the county assure that it gets handled so that they do get their distribution, because it's a big piece of money for a school district. That's just a thought that I have, and I hope it didn't come out the wrong way. It's not meant the wrong way. Any comments about if this would be a good solution?
I think that, I mean, if a school district can go back and double check their district ID number and make sure that their report matches, at least they know that whatever numbers they finished with and submitted with were the numbers used by the county to make the calculations. I don't know if there's a mechanism or something that would catch if a school wasn't submitted yet and they tried to submit this form for some reason without the county submit or without the school submission. Is there a spot where it would stop it and say there's nothing there?
Yes.
Okay.
It does say on the screen, you know, maybe not all your districts are submitted. It'll leave the submit ID line blank.
Yep.
So there are things that the county can look at immediately and know, oh, I still have districts unsubmitted.
Sure.
And there is one additional step that seems to have been added by OPI in the last couple of years. Whenever a district has submitted but then needs to unsubmit, somebody at OPI will contact like our office and say, just so you know, is it okay? And so then we're aware when districts are unsubmitting to make changes.
And I think the big thing will just be, like I said, the timeline, right? Like some counties, unfortunately, aren't getting the end of year reports to schools by the date they're supposed to. So then the schools are behind on getting their TFS and their budgets in. So then it's just going to be a trickle down. So I think it'll just have to be a dialogue between the school districts and the counties of we need these reports so we can do our reports and vice versa. Like for those end of year balances and things like that. And that's hard. I know that everybody is dealing with staffing changes and recruitment issues and all sorts of things. So there's no shade being thrown here. I know that it's a process for everybody.
You know, and I think your point earlier that you stated by saying it's important that we all understand that we all have a role in this very complicated mechanism. I think that's really poignant to this particular discussion, because as you go through this thing, you see that the timing's super important. And there have been circumstances in which certain counties just cannot do particular things because, I'll just say it this way, things blew up on them and it put the districts in a bad way. But yeah, communication often is the way to solve all that stuff. And we just got to do our very, very best to make it work. Anybody else have thoughts on that?
I'm just going to pipe in here. This is Nancy from the budget office, and I'm going to put some weight on Shelley that in all the education, both that MASBO and OPI do, I think that's super important to get out there to everyone, how important their piece is timely, so that, you know, and for the counties too. If everybody understands why they have to do what they have to do so that the next step can be done, because I think that's one thing in a lot of this school funding stuff that people don't understand, that if they don't get their reports in timely, then it holds up somebody else trying to get their reports done by dates. And a lot of these things have dates and times that they're due. And so everybody needs to do their part. So that's my piece.
Thanks, Nancy. I really agree. Like, I know Autumn and I are going to be talking to the county superintendent conference in April. But I think the county superintendents will want to touch base with the treasurers in their counties as well and make sure treasurer reports are getting out to the school districts in a timely manner. I know there's a few schools in one particular county in particular that they didn't get their June ending balances until August. So then how do they make sure that they really have time to calculate their TFS and their budgets appropriately and get that back into the superintendent so that they can then county superintendent so they can process this. And I just think it's an education component all the way around within communication. So I agree. Thank you.
Great points, everybody. Okay, we're in the home stretch. Promise you, we're heading for home on this thing. There's a couple last little steps that occur, and I'll wrap up then after this. So having discussed, and I'm wrapping back to this just to refresh everybody's memory, the counties are finishing off those FP10As. The counties are going to hit this submit button. When they hit that submit button, something new magical happens. The new magic that happens is we're going to go ahead, and now we're in September. We're going to go ahead and talk about this form for a second. I'm pointing out to 3 different groups here. We need to do some programming changes. This needs to be extended for the base elementary and base high school areas because these are now county levies. So it says across the top edge here, these are all county-based levies. The bottom half of this report is the district level levies. These 2 columns are going to have to be removed. So after all the districts of the county are submitted, and once the county submits the FP10A, the OPI creates this FP9 form. And what it is it's an approval form for counties to sign. And what occurs is somebody here at OPI, an OPI staff member, goes and produces this FP9 form. And I just pointed out what needs to be changed on it, but you can see here, these are all the different district level levies and county levies. But here's the more important part, at least I believe it's the more important part. Counties then have an obligation to sign and return the form to the OPI. So the clerk, the treasurer, and the superintendent print and sign this thing. When you do that, that says that you have, at the county level, fixed and approved all these mills for all the districts in your county, because these are the mills based on the August taxable value that will be used to print property tax bills on behalf of school districts. Jessica, you can straighten me out if I'm misspeaking, but I think I'm pretty right on this.
You are.
So, yeah, so be super careful that what's being printed on property tax bills is from the signed form. So let's just go on. This is a little bit fun and scary part. When we receive that FP9 form signed and returned to the OPI quite literally goes into the Mayfair system one last time, and they go to this FP9 has been accepted, and they check that checkbox. Now, counties on occasion, for very specific reasons, will strike an initial, a mill, or one of these things here. And we will go ahead and modify them because that's what's been signed to. We'll modify them in our system. There's another screen. This is one of 2 screens. And we will check that checkbox. When the checkbox is checked, something more happens in programming. When the checkbox is checked, the information that was written to the FP9 and also the FP10A for GTB creation flows to yet a 3rd database in our system called payment. And it'll be written to the pay entitlement table. Those pay entitlements then become the distributions that the OPI makes, and they will go to the counties. So let's just talk about that for a second. So now we've got ourselves to the payment system. So they check the checkbox. The state GTB is paid to the counties here. The counties are required to distribute the district-based GTB aid from the county fund for the purpose. And it can be a combination because they have to fulfill the entire requirement amount. The county distribution can be made up of that GTB, the county levy non-levy revenues, the county level unreserved fund balance reappropriated, and the county levy. So just like the 2240 money is, and I always refer to it as that, that's the retirement distribution to school districts. This would work in a similar mechanism. We won't call it 2240. The OPI is going to develop a new number and will provide that to the counties and the school districts so that they know what to receive those amounts under. And it should equal the amount of the requirement. So let's see, we're going to create a new general fund revenue source code, and we'll let everybody know what it is. And we'll make sure that it goes to, so that districts and counties know how to handle this. Right. And then districts are going to receive the revenue from the county under that revenue source code for general fund based funding. And the distribution is going to go as long with GTB. It'll go out in December and May. Yeah. And this down here is just a note for our programmers that this report has to be adjusted as well. Anyway, hooray. We hit the word end. So is there common discussion that needs to occur? We have 8 minutes left. I can stop sharing, or I can leave it up, or should we end this recording?
I do have one question. So schools have until December, technically, to adjust their TFS if required, like if they find an error, which could throw some monkey wrench into this if it's a significant error or anything in that end. Where would they're going to be stuck though with the numbers that are levied at that point, correct? I mean, there's no way to go back and adjust that.
Yeah, but recall what it says in the ARM. The ARM says that you can make TFS changes that don't affect fund balance.
Right. Okay.
And so, yeah, I mean, they can shift around expenditure codes, but it can't affect the fund balance. And therefore, it can't affect this requirement or the available revenue to support it at the budget level.
So it'd be
Yeah.
a prior period on the next TFS on the following year.
Absolutely,
maybe.
yeah. Good. That's a good point. I hadn't thought of that one before. Anybody else?
Are we working with besides the work that I know Autumn and I are touching base with county superintendent, meeting in Missoula, or not Missoula, Miles City in April, are the counties going to be sharing this presentation? Is that your thinking moving forward with this?
My plan was to post this to the website, on the school finance website under our webinars, and then I was going to let Nancy at Mako know that it was posted. She was going to be here today, but they had a conference in Billings, so that they have access to it, and then I'm going to let them know it's posted as well. I have a Mako, like the Monday Money presentation on the 9th of March. And I'm going to just let them know again that it is posted out there.
Hey, let me stop
Awesome.
the recording if we're going to have this kind of conversation.
Oh, sorry.
Is there any questions germane to the calculation or anything that was seen or heard earlier?
I guess I really quick just wanted to make a clarification.
Yeah.
So right now, like with the retirement fund, we have in the school's budgets, we have a 2240 line. It's got the amount so there will be a similar something now in the general fund that I can then take off the budgets to know exactly what that, okay, perfect.
Yes.
You even had a suggested number. Should we say it, Autumn, or are we still?
Well,
in the air?
we've decided on 2250 for elementary and 2260 for high school.
Perfect.
Perfect. Now, if we change it, don't yell at us.
Yeah.
Hey, I'm gonna stop. Anything more? Stop recording? Okay, I'm gonna stop. Okay, you're not being